This program exists thanks to the American Heritage Center, the Wyoming State Archives, and the Wyoming State Historic Records Advisory Board. This program is funded by grants made available through Wyoming SHRAB by the National Historical Publications and Records Commission and are administered by the Wyoming State Archives through the Department of State Parks and Cultural Resources. So good morning, everyone. Welcome to our latest Quick Tips, Disaster Preparedness and Response, Quick Tip session with the NEDCC and the RAP program. For those of you who don't know, I'm Morgan Stentz. I am Wyoming State Roving Archivist. And today we are joined with Jesse Keel from the NEDCC, who's going to share some of the programs and preparedness services that they have. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to you, Jesse.
Thank you. And I'm glad you said good morning, and then I had to think about it. I'm over here in Massachusetts, so it is afternoon for me, but good morning to you all. Again, my name is Jesse. I'm an Associate Preservation Specialist at the Northeast Document Conservation Center, and I am very thrilled to be here with you all today. So let's get started. I'm hoping a lot of you are familiar with NEDCC, but just for anyone who's not, right, it's the Northeast Document Conservation Center, which is a bit of a misnomer. Of course, we are technically based in the Northeast in Andover, Massachusetts, and I am here in our offices today. So just north of Boston, but we work nationwide with organizations all over the country. We do book, paper, photograph conservation, but we also offer digitization services and audio preservation services as well. And then I'm on our preservation services team. So I am kind of part of a small team of archivists, librarians who have that kind of background. But we are going out and sort of being the kind of the front-facing end of NEDCC, and we are doing assessments, consultations, maintaining all sorts of resources, doing webinars, all sorts of things that I'm going to talk to you about today, actually. So an emergency preparedness, as you can imagine, ends up being a big part of that, right? Because that is so fundamental to the preservation work of organizations of all shapes and sizes across the country. So it's just a quick little bit of background on NEDCC. Before I start talking about some of the ways that we support organizations in their emergency management and disaster planning work, I think it's really nice to sort of just take a quick step to think about the emergency management cycle when we're teaching about disaster preparedness, emergency response. This is always where we start. If you've ever taken a training kind of with either like your local area or like actual like emergency response, first responders, the emergency management cycle is very much how they think about it as well, right? And when we're working with folks all over the country, we're really focused on this first half of the cycle, right? We're thinking about what you can do to prevent and mitigate disasters and emergencies before they happen. We're thinking about things that you can do to prepare, because even if you do every kind of prevention and mitigation step possible, there's no way to officially 100% prevent all disaster. It's always a possibility, right? Emergencies are always possible. So we want to prepare you so that when they do happen, right, you're able to respond and recover sort of as efficiently as possible. And then we talk about how part of that is what you would do in response and recovery. So we're sort of thinking about all these different parts on the cycle, but keeping in mind, right, that today we're really focused on the services we offer that help you in those kind of first two stages, but that you can also call us and we can also help you when you're doing response and recovery. So we'll talk about that today, but I think this is a nice framework to start thinking about how to imagine the work that we have to do around emergency management and preparedness. And that, unfortunately, the bad news is that it's never done, right? You're in the cycle and you're just sort of continuously going around. Hopefully, not having disasters very often, not being in response and recovery very often is really our ideal situation. So with that, one of the things I kind of want to highlight first is some of the kind of custom assessments and consultation work that we can do. We can do emergency preparedness assessments where we really, spend time with organizations to walk through, what their risks are, what their vulnerabilities are, and where they can do some of that prevention and mitigation work, right? Having that kind of third party, that fresh set of eyes come in and look at your space can be so helpful and help really produce a report that gives you actionable steps, advice, recommendations. And reports like that are really powerful, not just because it's information for you to work from, but it can support, grant applications. If we come in and say, wow, your shelving is really, is going to cause an emergency if something were to happen, and you wanted to apply for a grant for improved shelving or an improved, sprinkler system, having a third-party consultant report can be very powerful for that. So that's one aspect. But in addition to doing sort of assessments, we can also help with policy development. And so a lot of the times we hear from organizations that the time and support it takes to actually write a disaster plan, establish some of this kind of really important documentation is such a big challenge. And so we have a bunch of different models that we can do. We can really do a coaching model where we sort of just kind of go through the process with you, but you're doing a lot of the inputting of the information. We've also worked with organizations where we kind of do a lot more of the hands-on creation of the plan and policies because, staff don't have that time. And one great example of this, we have these great kind of stories about some of the projects we've worked on our website. And so I'm highlighting here a really fun story about some consultation work we did with the San Diego Wildlife Alliance Library. So it's a library at the San Diego Zoo. So they have really fun collections, really fun things there. But they really, again, needed, they'd had an assessment that really identified the need to update their disaster plan. They sort of had a really old one in place. And so one of our preservation specialists had a series of online meetings to really support and help them audit that current plan and update it and get that information into a more usable format to kind of better the preparedness at their organization. So that's linked on screen, and I can share these slides afterwards so folks will have access to these links because I think this is really worth reading and it's a great example of some of the work we can do. And I should also mention, for folks who don't, I know you're obviously all in Wyoming, but I love to highlight the grant project we have going on in California right now, because I think it's such a great model that we're really hoping other states look at. The California State Libraries did a bunch of funding and awarded a grant where we are doing free emergency preparedness consultations and disaster plan writing help to California or cultural heritage organizations. And so this project started back in 2022, 2023. And so it's now in its third or fourth year. And you name the size, shape, type of location, from very small volunteer run spots to really big organizations in California, who of course faces like a very unique set of disaster threats, natural disaster threats. And so it's been really great to see this model kind of approached at the state level. We have an entire team of consultants working in California, traveling up and down the state to kind of bolster and get folks to have written disaster plans. So I'm not really directly involved in that project. Again, I'm working with clients all over the country, but really interesting to see what California is doing in this field. So with that, this is just sort of one aspect. One tool that NEDCC has that this is like one of the things I really want you all to take away today. If you're not familiar with our D-Plan tool, this can also be another great option to help you with your kind of overall preparedness. It's not just about your disaster plan. This is going to help you assess your risk and get some help managing all of the various prevention and mitigation action steps that you might take. But what's nice is that D-Plan is an online tool that can help you, manage your readiness, helps you create parts of your disaster plan. It's online. It does have a yearly, very minimal fee that just pays for essentially the cost of running the site. So I think it's $60 a year. And it does also have a free version where you can log in, and that's what you're seeing here on screen. If you log in, you'll see these options here. And if you click on Pocket Response Resource, this is a free template that you can download that looks like this. Could be something you already all are familiar with. The Council of State Archivists had a very similar template, and ours kind of was adapted from that. And it's a completely free template where you go in and it's completely customizable, where you can really include all of your kind of most important contact information, vendor information, emergency services that you could need. And then it has a backside where you put in kind of initial steps, salvage priorities, information like that. And it's one piece of paper that you can print, you fold it up, you keep it in your wallet. I keep a screenshot on my phone. And you have that sort of most initial important information easily at your fingertips before you can maybe get to your formal actual like disaster plan binder. And so, when folks are asking me where to start with emergency, planning, disaster planning, it's overwhelming. I always have them start by working on this Pocket Response Resource because it gives you, it's easy enough to do. It shouldn't take a long time. And it gives you something to have in hand and really get started on the process and feel like, wow, I've got something done. And it helps you have that in place as like a safety net while you work on developing your larger plan. So if you do not have a PRR, highly recommend logging into D-Plan, grabbing this free resource, and there's some other great free resources linked on that website as well. And also while you're on there, you can look, we have a free demo account. So if you want to be able to go in and see what all the pieces of D-Plan look like, you'll find information on the D-Plan website about how to get into that account and sort of look around before it's something that you investigate doing. So that's one of my favorite tools. We also offer customized training. So we do a lot of different online training, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But we do in-person workshops. We will travel just about anywhere. I've been everywhere from, Louisiana to Oregon, to obviously Massachusetts, Vermont, and then the areas in New England, teaching especially kind of hands-on wet salvage. So that's what you're seeing here in these pictures. We actually bring bins and sample collections, and we fill them with water and fill them with old books and photographs and actually work through with folks what it means to like take a book full of water out of a kind of flooded situation and what it takes to air dry it. And we review those techniques. So we do that kind of training, but also folks have had other goals, maybe they don't want the actual hands-on wet salvage part. We've come and taught, just more specifically about disaster plan writing. We have done, projects where we just work on filling out a Pocket Response Resource. So we can really customize emergency training workshops to really be what organizations need. And sometimes we kind of are hosted by an institution, and libraries, archives, museums from all over travel to that space. And that's fun. We get to have like people meeting their neighbors and doing some of that kind of connecting, which I find so critical. But we also sometimes go to just one institution. So like a large organization that has a lot of different staff, and just do trainings for them as well. Obviously, we also have online training. So we have webinars that we do very regularly. I know that we're teaching disaster planning coming up in June, I believe. That's on our website. But certain free webinars that we do periodically are, if they're free, they're recorded. And so they're put on our YouTube channel. So if you've never been on the NEDCC YouTube channel, I highly recommend. Lots of great free videos to watch that have different kinds of training. So highly recommend that, and highly recommend being on our newsletter so you see what we have coming up. We've definitely planned our webinars out at least through next summer, July 2027. So if you like to plan ahead on webinars, you can do that. But I'm really excited to tell you all that we just got this website up, launched yesterday. So you're the first ones I'm getting to share this with, which is that we have a new online training. It's going to be 2 afternoons in May. Afternoons East Coast time, so it'll be start a little earlier in the day for you all. But it's going to be live online training dedicated to really working with folks on their emergency readiness. And so we're going to have kind of a mix of lectures and live labs and demos that we're doing online on all types of, everything from first response to how to write a disaster plan. We'll talk about mold, surface cleaning. We'll talk about the supplies that you need, how to work with vendors, really with the idea that you're coming out of this having worked on a risk assessment, having worked on your prioritization list, having worked on your pocket response resource, so that you're really kind of doing these 2 half days of training online with a big cohort and really walking away with something concrete. So this is a brand new training opportunity that we're doing, and you can read the full agenda and kind of get a sense of it online on our website. So I'm really excited about that. I think it's going to be really fun. But I hope you also know that our website is full of really useful free resources. We answer questions all the time about emergency preparedness and planning. And so we have these great leaflets on our website. In this leaflet series, I highly recommend some of these. You could just print them and include them in your disaster planning binder. I think the one that we encourage people to use most often is the mold response. That can be really useful. It breaks things up into really concrete steps if you encounter mold in your collections. We also see here we have a worksheet for working on your emergency plan, and that can be such a good way if you're looking to get started. Just working through that worksheet is such a great first step. So I want to highlight those. And then we have a whole web page just about disaster assistance. And so this is a great one to bookmark. We've put a lot of resources there and in one handy place for you, so you don't have to go digging around all over the internet. But what I want to highlight here is that we have a 24/7 collections emergency hotline. And this, in the month of March, who's on the hotline but me? So if you call the emergency hotline this month, you will get me. It goes to my cell phone, and I will, talk to you about the mold you've just found. I will talk to you about the flooded basement, and help get you some first response steps, email you resources, that sort of thing. So highly recommend putting that number in your phone. It's completely free to call us. We're just happy to help answer some questions, get you going in the right direction, or just reaffirm the steps that you are already thinking about, things like that. So really want to highlight that. Yeah, that was, I guess, my last one. Just want to reiterate, if you come across preservation questions, emergency preparedness questions, you can email info@NEDCC. That will get forwarded to our preservation services department. If you have a question specifically about something I talked about today, or you just really want to ask me a question, that my email is on screen as well. We're always happy to give free preservation advice. So if you just have questions, we will answer them. We will send you resources. We love to do it, and we get funding from NEH to help support us doing some of that reference. So please email us. And of course, you all have great resources in Wyoming too, but if you need another ear, we're happy to help. And check out our social media and newsletter if you don't already. Okay, that was a lot. I'm happy to answer truly any and all questions.
You want to mention this, Jesse, and I missed it. Is there a directory of resources around here, like services, maybe in the Colorado, Wyoming, Montana, whatever? We tend to go outside our state a lot of times for resources. So even if it's not just in Wyoming, but surrounding area.
Resources of what kind?
Well, like you were talking about, for water damage, a place that can help you mitigate that.
Yeah, so it's a great question. So for example, if you were to call us and you're like, oh my goodness, who do I call? Or you were filling out your disaster plan and you wanted to kind of list some relevant, either within the state or local-ish vendors. A lot of the times, the big national property restoration companies, so we're talking Belfour, Polygon, and BMS-CAT. Those are, and if you go to our, hold on, give me 1 second. If you go to, if you're on this page, on our emergency preparedness page, I think we list the emergency numbers. All 3 of those vendors have locations all over the country. And I think for a lot, they're a great place to start. A lot of times they have an okay amount of expertise on not just property restoration and helping you respond to a disaster, but enough kind of related to the special needs of an archives, museum situation. I still think you have to be very careful and communicative with them. And sometimes you still need to reference you have something very rare damaged, a conservator perhaps. But we usually start there. And then I do recommend, if you're struggling to find someone, you can reach out to us and we're happy to also just like help with a little Google sleuthing of who's local and nearby. I also recommend, this is a great reason to talk to your local institutions, right? You probably know somebody who's had a water disaster or something and has used a vendor before. And so I always recommend when you're in this planning stage and working on your disaster plan, ask your neighbors and colleagues who they've used before and had either good experiences with or bad experiences with. And then you can also call and talk to those vendors ahead of an emergency, right? You can, especially somebody like a big one like Belfour, if you want to establish a relationship ahead of time, they're going to be they want your business, right? So they want to answer your questions. So never feel bad about reaching out sort of in this disaster planning phase to ask questions about their services, how to best contact them. All of that and having that initial relationship really does serve you in the event of a large scale emergency where maybe they're getting inquiries from multiple businesses in response to a really big kind of catastrophic event. You might, if you have an established relationship, if they know you, you might kind of do a little bit better on that prioritization list. So for local kind of recommendations, I always really recommend talking to the folks in your area for those recommendations.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Okay, if there's no other questions directly. Oh, go ahead, Sarah.
Thank you, Jesse, for sharing all this information. This is great. If there is one thing that you would recommend to our participants today, like the essentials of what you need to do, what would that be?
Yeah, it's definitely the pocket response resource. I think that's the one thing I want like all people to do. And I think it's just such a great starting place. If you have a pocket response resource, perhaps already, the next thing that I would do is, it's to have a disaster plan. There's a lot of other things that you can do to kind of better your preparedness. But really having a plan in place is so useful. And so either, start with the pocket response resource if you don't have a plan. And then once you've done that, downloading something like that worksheet that's for free on our website, or using something like dplan, either or, and really just start. And I think the worksheet really makes it approachable, because you'll see like the first couple pages of the worksheet is just contact information, which is what you've put into your pocket response resource. So you've done a lot of the work. And then after that, it's listing salvage priorities. So if you've never done any prioritization work of your collections, like, do you know if there was an emergency, what would be the highest priority for kind of immediate salvage and recovery? For some of you, that may be really obvious. You maybe have like one kind of super important collection or maybe one super important item. And in other cases, that can be really hard to decide. And so that's because of that challenge. I really encourage folks to start thinking about what their priorities are in their collection now, because it might take some discussion, some research, some thinking through what that priority might be. And then once you know what your collection priorities are for salvage, right? If you know what the most important and valuable materials are in your collection, you can include some information about how to best salvage and respond if those items were, wet or got, flooded or something like that. And all of those salvage kind of procedures for how you would handle a book versus a photograph are, people have already written those up. So if you go, and these are in some of our resource guides on our leaflets, where you can go and just copy those out. So it doesn't have to be an enormous lift. Eventually, if you want to customize by adding floor plans and writing supply kits, all of those things are good. But having, knowing who to call and what initial steps to take, which is what that worksheet's going to work you through, is sort of what I think is the most important. And to actually then finish the plan and print it and share it with, volunteers, with staff. The other thing I see a lot is folks who have have half finished plans, or they have and I have been at a previous organization where I was sort of guilty of that. I worked on a plan and then I never did that final push to bring it up at a staff meeting or discuss it with my colleagues. And so you do need to not just write a plan, but actually implement it at your organization. So have a conversation about it, print it out, make sure everybody knows where it is and how to use it. So those things, all of that in my mind is more important than buying, a bucket. I mean, that supplies are great too, and having them on hand is important, but doing, having a plan and printing it and having it in place is going to do so much. And so that's really where I would start.
Thank you. That's wonderful.
Something you just said, Jesse, just made me think, because you can have a plan and it can be written out, and then the emergency happens and you're like a chicken with its head cut off, wait a minute, I've got to now read the plan. So what should you have, a fire drill type of thing? Okay, everyone, let's picture we have a water disaster. What do we do? How do you get it to sink in? But that to read the plan once there's an emergency.
That's such a great point. Yeah, training and practicing does then go a long way after you have the plan in place. And there's a lot of different ways that you can go about that. Hands-on wet salvage training is great. That really puts people through. But one of the things that we do at hands-on wet salvage training that any organization can do themselves, which is really nice, is a tabletop exercise, which is sort of what you're describing, Leslie, with this hypothetical. If you actually go on the Library of Congress website and search Library of Congress tabletop exercise, I don't have the link handy. They have a list of scenarios that are example disaster emergency scenarios that could happen to a library, museum, archive. And so what we do when we're teaching the workshop, but again, you could do this, at a staff meeting, at a meeting with your volunteers. Everybody sits down with a plan, and they have you all sit down and read the scenario. And of course you can customize the scenario as is relevant if you want. And you really do just talk through, okay, what would we do first? What would we do second? Is there an answer to that question in the plan? What does the plan say to do? And also what's nice about that is it doesn't just teach you all how to respond and practice that thought process. It probably brings up some vulnerabilities in your plan. And so it's a great time to then go back and revise the plan. That's just as much as training is important and making sure people know it, but updating the plan as things change is also really important. So I also say, when you implement your plan and put it, print it out, put a note on your calendar a year from that date that says, update the plan today, so that you periodically go back, because I'm sure your staff changes, vendors change, and you just want to keep that information up to date. But I really recommend a tabletop exercise. I think that's a really easy, hypothetical, completely free way to just run a quick test on that plan. And there's a lot, you probably can read other hypothetical scenarios online, but I think the list from the Library of Congress is really useful.
Yeah, that's great information. Thanks. We should do that at the American Heritage Center. We've never done that. Yeah.
Does anyone else have any other questions for Jesse? Okay, I'm going to switch gears a little bit because I do have as Jesse mentioned, it's sometimes best to have your peers and colleagues that are here in state to help bounce ideas of what to do off of. So I've kind of created some questions to see how Wyoming's cultural heritage institutions have handled these situations in the past, or how we might handle them, or if we don't have a collections policy, get us to start thinking about, well, what will I do if this happens? So let's go ahead and start with beyond the big disasters, fires, floods, what are some of the quiet emergencies that pose the most consistent threat to your collections?
I know we've had a mouse issue at our institution, and so all of our trash cans are the tall types
Mm-hmm.
with the cover to make sure that if something tempting is thrown in there that a mouse would like, it can't get to it, and it's covered, so hopefully they can't smell it as well. But
Mm-hmm.
that's something that we do. We don't have the open trash cans in public places here. And I don't know, that might be something all museums and places do, but just if you don't, that's something to think about.
Yeah, definitely. Especially because you have people that work in these places full time, right? In these cultural heritage sites, we have full-time staff who will eat lunch there. And then so thinking about how to handle the food waste, which might attract pests and cause minor emergencies for the collections, would be important. And how we handle that.
And not just mice, I mean, other things too are attracted to that.
Yes, but mentioning the other things sometimes make me itchy. So
Yeah. We won't discuss that.
it's okay. Fire, water, bugs, and mice. Yep. Oh, yeah. Water is a really big one for all of us, right? If a pipe leaks, or if some flooding happens I know the flooding in basements happens a lot here in Wyoming. Having that as a potential threat. There are also security risks that we face, not just with the collections, but for all of us in general, depending on where we are and how things are happening. But yeah, so all of those are just like things we don't often think about, or that kind of live in the back of our minds when we're working with these collections, right? So let's get into the second question that I have. If you had to evacuate your building in 10 minutes, what is the one priority item or collection group you'd be most worried about saving?
Now, this is April from the Riverton Museum, and we have quite a few tribal artifacts. That would be our top priority. Yes.
Yeah. And April, do you guys happen to have a plan in place for how to save those? If not, that's okay. There's no shame.
Not a detailed one, but we do.
Okay.
We just have, a general disaster plan, and where we have stated that would be one of our top priorities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, that's awesome. Halls, war bonnets, cradle board, and original written documents. Yeah.
A question like that really has me thinking, like, if your most valuable items are spread like all over,
Mm-hmm.
and trying to get those together, would it be better to store the most valuable in one area? But I don't even know how possible that is, because you've got different types of materials. But yeah, that's okay, you have 10 minutes to get out of the building, and then you're running around all over your archive, like, okay, where is that certain item? Okay, it's over here, but that
also gets into the thought process of like, how are we storing these materials then, right? And especially like, what if the situation calls for the emergency is between you and the target object, like one of the priority objects. So really, not to get very philosophical, but is all of collections management just preemptive disaster planning?
I don't know if this is appropriate to talk about, but a few years ago, I attended this like really long all-day seminar on disaster planning. And that's exactly what we talked about, was like color coding some of our bins, like red being like second choice. No, red was first choice, like grab it immediately. And then the yellow bin was like second choice, and have those really close to like a place where everybody can get to really quickly. And so I think about that a lot. At the State Archives, we do store our most precious, valuable items actually right next to the archives reading room because of that. But we do not implement the bin system here. But now that we're talking about it, I'm like, we really should do that, because I don't want to dig through everything to find the Constitution, and it would just be a disaster.
Yeah.
Good
Yeah,
point.
that's exactly what I was thinking about, Sarah, was those kind of founding Wyoming documents that we have in the back. And I know generally what area they're in, but it would take some actual time to like pull those boxes. And so, yeah, maybe it'd be a good idea to kind of locate those items and have kind of an emergency running list, because that is kind of a little scary to think about.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm now thinking about the state archive staff had a meeting earlier, and we talked a little bit about how we're changing up some of the storage things. And so now I'm like, oh, cool. Now I've added another thing to the staff meeting in a couple weeks. But no, it's important for us to know where these things are and to be able to get to them, so that way we can feel safe knowing that we can get these materials out and protect them, right?
I was just thinking, water disasters is such a common thing to happen to us. How protective is the dock box?
Which type of dock box? Like the Hollinger box?
Yeah.
I'm so glad
Or
you
the box.
Jesse, for context, last month I did a alternatives to the Hollinger box presentation. And while Hollinger boxes are amazing and they're acid neutral and all of that, they are water susceptible. And so are the baker's boxes. So like, that's when the appeal of those plastic boxes and even just for temporary storage are nice, because they help prevent substantial water damage, but any moisture that gets locked inside, I would be concerned about for long-term storage. So maybe, I don't know how that would work in practice, but maybe having some plastic totes and stuff on hand to then put materials in as you're trying to get out quickly.
Can I just say something about the boxes?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. So it's funny because that we get that question a lot, especially from folks who are concerned, about the idea of a box that's not plastic and the water damage. And one thing I will say though is they are more protective than you would think though. And this is why we put a big emphasis on making sure folks are boxing materials generally, right? We want them to be in a container, like any container, right? Will absorb a certain amount of water before it hits your materials. And you'd be amazed at how much water that box will absorb before it actually if it's in a pool of water, it's in a pool of water. But when we're talking about, especially like overhead leaks and stuff like that, that box is going to make a difference in the water that actually touches the collections materials inside. And so the box, any box is useful. We have those same concerns that you just pointed out about, keeping things in plastic. But also that's why your shelving is important, making sure you're not storing things on top of shelves or storing things directly on the floor, because having shelf above your boxes, again, is providing that other layer of protection. So we don't want to see, and we like that top canopy over items, and even having like sheeting on hand, like plastic tarps that you can throw over a set of shelves if you're worried about water that's going to come into a space. Is so useful. But definitely having collapsible like milk crates or bins that are really sturdy and made of plastic for responding, evacuating, salvaging, all of that is super useful. If you have a bunch of wet books that you won't need to send out to a vendor, right? You're not packing them into a cardboard banker's box. You do need those really strong plastic bins in that case.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I thought it would be more susceptible to water than what it sounds like. So, yeah. All right. I have more questions. I know. Oh, I do really like this one. So we've talked about how disaster planning can be a very intimidating thing because, I mean, as we're talking about in these questions, there are so many facets to think about. So what is a tangible, one small, low-cost step, which I think we've already talked about, that we can take or has your organization recently taken to help in the preparedness in case of a disaster or emergency?
I know for us, as we keep our phone list updated, that we also have certain point people that if something happens, it's not, we have certain people to kind of corral things, I guess you could say. So like on the 5th floor, you know, not everyone has a 5th floor, but who's our point person if something is going on, and 4th floor in our reading room, and who's our point person, who do we contact if there is a major emergency. And so yeah, we keep that updated. And who is in our, who is typically in our building, like say a fire alarm happens, so that we know who to look for. Like, I don't know about all the institutions, but you have volunteers and you have part-timers, you may have interns, making sure that you know who could be in the building.
Yeah.
Yeah, similarly, our executive assistant for the agency updates our phone list every month, and she sends it out to everybody. And I think that's really, really useful. And we usually do, for our building, they usually do a fire drill sometime in the summer. Well, it's unexpected, but it is usually sometime in the summer. And I think that's been really helpful because they did change where we stand, because we had to cross the street either this way or this way, and they decided it's safer to go north of the building than to go east of the building. And so I think that was really helpful. But yeah.
Everyone hates fire drills, but they are helpful to know what some of the weak points, what do we need to figure out.
Yeah, and so thinking about that, so has anyone worked with a local partner, so a library, a fire department, a police department, to help think through how to navigate an emergency? In disaster plans I've worked on in the past, and in policies I've worked on in the past, one thing I've always recommended for the institution I was helping write for was contacting the fire department, so that way you can have and invite them into the space, so that way they know, hey, when I come into this space, these are the things to look for and try to preserve, because whenever an emergency happens, we always want to prioritize people first, right? So when let's say there is a small fire in the collection space, then they know what they're looking for and what is going on and how to navigate the space before they even get there. So that could be one of the tangible steps in the coming weeks to think about. Calling your local fire department or emergency response team and saying, hey, well, do you want to come tour this space, so that way we can talk about, in the case of an emergency, what will happen. that could be one way of going about it. But has anybody had this experience? Have they reached out to others about it yet? And if not, that's okay.
Our fire department is like volunteers, so I don't know anybody who's like the fire chief or anything like that. I mean, we have a fire department, but who's to say that they could help us? Let's put it that way, because the volunteers are basically scattered all over Fremont County. We got some here in Fort Washakie, some in Arapahoe or Ethity, Riverton, Lander. So it's hard for them to all come together, and it's limited. And I think there's only like 5 firefighters that we have. And the only fire station that I know of that has like, I guess people is all the way in Lander, and Lander's like a 15 to 30-minute drive.
Yeah.
So like, what do you do from there, I guess, if your community and your fire department is basically non-existent?
That's a great question. I would recommend still inviting those volunteers in, and then also having some form of preventative on hand. So like in a lot of these public spaces, we have fire extinguishers, right? So maybe inviting a volunteer in and having them do a little mini training on how to use the fire extinguisher. That way, in the case of an emergency, you and the other collection staff know what can be done. And then if it gets out of hand, I also know, I haven't found anything that has said do or do not use these, but fire suppression blankets have been more popular recently. And it's also a way of smothering it fairly quickly. So that, and then you don't risk the chemical reactions to any of the materials.
Here's kind of the fun part though, right? As I said, fire, water, bugs, and mice are one of our threats, but the main ones would be fire, definitely fire. Our building is old and it's made out of wood. So anybody could just strike a match and light it to our post office, and then what? So yeah, we live in a scary our little area.
Just a little bit anyway.
Just a little bit. If we had somebody that was crazy enough to be like, oh, we're gonna set fire to this place. Because as you know,
So-
our council's here, so
Yeah. Well, and Sierra here in Riverton, I think there was an agreement set up at one point. We probably need to reach out again. But I think the idea is that if there was an emergency, because we're with the county, that we could go to our county fairgrounds and set up an incident command where we could, potentially bring those objects that could be salvaged and take it there to go through them and store them and that kind of thing in the event of an emergency where we couldn't actually be in our building. So maybe there's somebody local like that too, that you could communicate with.
I mean, knowing, Sierra, for you, I would say talk to the school that houses the cultural center, because they already have collection spaces a little bit allocated. And while it might not be the most ideal, but the objects you can save and get out of the archive, that could be a place for it to go.
oh yeah, definitely.
But that's a conversation with Rachel and Robin.
Actually, it's a conversation with the entire school board,
Oh, that's true. Yes.
because it's their school. So yeah, like I said, this kind of had me thinking about that. I'm like, dang,
Yeah.
we really need a new archives. we need that bad to where it's like not flammable and somebody can just
Yeah.
screw the post office.
Is is there anything to the investment in like a fire-proof safe for some objects that are super, that you really do not? I'm thinking about the Wyoming Constitution and the original copy. Is that a helpful thing?
With how big our repository is, which it's not big, putting a safe inside is not possible.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess if you have an institution that is, I know some people may be watching this later. It's just a possible idea. I know everyone can't do it. We have one actually in our house that's small. My husband and I have one that would hold like some papers, maybe not so much artifacts, but I don't know how expensive it was.
Fair.
But just a thought.
We do have safes. I will say that we do have some. I think we got like 5. However, we don't know the codes to them because this was like way before me and my boss even got here. So we kind of have to look into, I wouldn't say locksmith because it has like a keypad. So I don't know. And we have no clue what's in there. So.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Jailbreak the device.
Literally, we have to. Oh, I will ask though another question. I don't know who could answer this, but poster restoration. I don't even know. Fixing posters. Let's put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Would anyone know how to do that? Who would you get in contact for that? Exactly.
What's wrong with the posters?
Some of them are like ripped. Some of them are curled up all the way.
Yeah, so you would definitely want to work with a paper conservator. So if you go on, I recommend to folks, I mean, we do paper conservation work like this, but we're not usually like, I mean, we're pretty far away. So going on AIC's, the American Institute of Conservation's Find a Conservator, they have a tool that allows you to search by location. And so you can figure out who's closest to you, but I definitely recommend using a like certified conservator to work on those materials.
Sierra, I think the one we have here in Wyoming is Beverly Perkins with the Buffalo Bill Center of the West. So just a few hours north of you. And I know for the tribe, she has openly said, or she has said to me that she would be, and I'm pretty sure she's open to it for anyone, not just you guys. She's open to email inquiries. So I have that contact that I can send you later today.
Oh, yes, please. That would be
of course. Yeah.
Because while cleaning up, I found posters that were damaged. Not a lot. There's some that are like laminated and they were rolled up, but others weren't laminated. So they're like starting to tear and wonderful, wonderful posters.
Gotcha.
Which is, these are some of the nice ones that we do want to keep around. Specifically our Shoshone Indian Day posters, which, oh goodness, they're so pretty. They're like works of art themselves.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Yes, and we definitely want to preserve those and make sure that those are available for future reference and just to use later. I did have one more question. So this will be my send you off to think about later question. What is the biggest lesson learned from a past or near almost happened emergency that changed how you handle your collections care today? And I might add to this one and say, what's something that we have thought about here today that you might not have thought about beforehand? And you might think about going forward as you work with your collections. So I will save that as I'm going to think about this later today, and thanks Morgan for leaving me with this. But I just want to say thank you to all of you. Thank you to Jessie for presenting and sharing all of your lovely resources with us. As always, here are all of my contact information. If you need to reach me, or if you didn't have a chance to write down Jesse's information before, I am happy to pass that along as long as she's okay with it as well. And so yeah, thank you all for joining and participating today. If you haven't already, please feel free to take our quick tip survey. This helps me help you. And I forgot to copy the link before I started talking about it. So I will happily share this link with you if you cannot scan it now for later. But thank you to all of you. Thank you, Jesse. I'm going to go ahead and end the recording now.